If you can believe it, another month has come and gone, and I've read more books. March was a really good reading month for me. I read a ton this month, and now I kind of want to talk about it. I want to do my March wrap up and talk about what's coming up in April because I got a few things coming down the pipe. I've working on a few books and kind of just generally discuss what's going to happen after I read those books. And I got some stuff on my TBR that I'm excited to finally have be getting around to. So first of all, I had 0 DNFs again in the month of March. I don't know why January started the way it did, but ever since, I have had 0 DNFs this year. And I started off really strongly this month, I'll be honest. I really started off with a big swing, which was The Witchwood Crown by Tad Williams. This was the first book of the month I read, and this was really good. Ostenard is slowly becoming one of my all-time favorite fantasy sagas. Each of these entries is incredible. I don't think Tad Williams has the ability to write bad fantasy, it seems. Everything I've read by him, at least so far, has worked for me. I think it's peak classic feeling fantasy. And I think The Witchwood Crown was an incredibly strong start to what I think is going to be one of my favorite series I read this year. I loved Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn last year. You guys will remember that. I think it's kind of the perfect trilogy when it comes to fantasy. But I'm thinking Ostenard might be even better. I thought the pacing was stronger here. I thought the character work was stronger here. I thought that the plot setting up here was stronger here. I just felt like Tad Williams really took another huge step up as a writer, and I'm looking forward to seeing where he goes from here. I gave it a 9 out of 10 only because I know that the rest of these books are going to be better, and I didn't want to give it too high of a score and then be disappointed. But yeah, again, Witchwood Crown was an incredibly strong start. The Dragonbone Chair was an incredibly strong start, so I'm not surprised at all that I like this. But yeah, this was just really good. I mean, the plot was amazing. The characters were amazing. I thought the pacing was really good. Much improved over Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. And I thought the general direction where the series was going was exciting. So it was a great way to start this month off. And again, I gave it a 9 out of 10. The second book of the month I read, and this was the book that I thought was going to be the reason I didn't finish many this month, was The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. This is a big book. This is nearly 50 hours on audio. It's like a 1,200 page book in print. My personal one, which is a very large version, very fancy looking version, is still almost 1,100 pages long. And it took me about 2 entire weeks to finish this. I mean, this took a lot of time for me. I usually read books in about a week or less, pretty typically for me. But this was a really long one. And I really wanted to take my time with this because this is the classic, right? This is the big one. You know, if you're gonna read a classic, it's gotta be The Count of Monte Cristo, right? And I'd never read it before. And going into it, I didn't know what to expect, besides the fact that it had been so highly praised. And I can say, coming out on it the other side, I really liked it. The Count of Monte Cristo was a very good book. I just completely fell in love with the world, the characters, the way it was written, the scope, the plot, the themes. I just thought all around it was a fantastic book. I think it's one I'm going to probably revisit every couple of years just to see how it lands, because this is one of those ones where it's just a classic, you know what I mean? It's a banger. It's one I just really enjoyed my time reading, and I'm hoping that maybe on rereads in the future I'll enjoy it even more. And I gave it a 9 out of 10. Again, there were just a few issues for me. I wanted more revenge. I'll admit, the pacing wasn't exactly the most exciting thing in the world, and there were a few plot points I thought were a little meandering, but beyond that, it was a very good book. But after that, I wanted to do some shorter books, so I kind of finished out the month with a bunch of shorter books, which is how I regained my status. And the first one I read that was shorter, on the shorter side, at least compared to what I normally read, was The Hunt for Red October by Tom Clancy. I'd never read a Tom Clancy book before this. And what a great first impression that this book gave me. This was awesome. The pacing was great. The characters were fun to follow. The plot was super intriguing. I thought it gripped me instantly, and it never stopped gripping me. I really like the atmosphere that Tom Clancy builds here. I think he's very good as a thriller writer. Obviously I've not read a lot of spy thrillers or espionage thrillers. This is actually my first one, really. But this was really good, and having never seen the movie, I had no idea what to expect. I really didn't, and I was pleasantly surprised by how grounded it was. I definitely had thought that this was going to be, my experience with spy stuff is James Bond, which if you've seen a James Bond film, not very serious, not very grounded. But The Hunt for Red October is very serious, very grounded. And I learned a lot about nuclear submarines that I hadn't known about before, which was awesome. Very well researched, I presume. I didn't bother looking up a nuclear submarine manual or anything to see if any of the information he conveyed was correct. But still, it was a really, really solid book. Probably, I definitely want to read these. I want to read more Tom Clancy books in the future, because I hear this is one of his weaker entries in writing, so I'm excited to see where it goes from here. I gave it an 8.5 out of 10. Just a really solid spy thriller. It was just nice to kind of get away from fantasy and big books for a second. And then jumping back into fantasy, but still kind of on the shorter side, at least compared to what I normally read, again, was the third book in the Dark Tower, The Wastelands by Stephen King. The Dark Tower is just shaping up to be one of those series for me. You know what I mean? Just it's on an incredible roll. I thought The Gunslinger was really solid. I thought the drawing of the three was even better, and I think The Wastelands is just as good as the drawing of the three. I mean, this was just incredible. The first half, I think the drawing of the three has a stronger first half than it does the second half. I think The Wastelands has a stronger second half than it does the first. But that's not to say that either of these books are bad by any means. The pacing here was incredible. The character work here was incredible. The atmosphere that King builds was incredible. The tension was thorough. The action was awesome. The villain here was great. I just love the world that Stephen King has created with The Dark Tower. It's by far the most original, most creative, most wacky fantasy series I've ever read. It is so unique. It is so different. I adore it. That's not surprising. I figured going into this series that I would fall in love with it, because everything I've read by Stephen King I've enjoyed so far. But The Wastelands just knocked it out of the park. It was another 9 out of 10 for me, and it strongly put Stephen King into the #1 spot for favorite author. That is how good it was. After that, I ran into my first real disappointment of the year. It wasn't a DNF, mostly because it was too short to not finish, and it wasn't horrible, but it's the worst book I've read all year. Very, very easily the worst book I've read all year, and that would be Police Your Planet. And I forget who even wrote this, and I'm not going to bother looking it up. But Police Your Planet, this was not a great science fiction book. The premise was really cool, right? This guy is a former cop, former gambler, former everything else, news reporter, and he gets sent to Mars to do a tour undercover to police and see how corrupt Mars is, right? And again, that premise is super intriguing, but the author does absolutely nothing with that premise. This is a total pulp cop novel, which, by the way, that's not me saying that's a bad thing. If you're into really pulpy cop stories, maybe this would work for you. But I went in with the expectations of this being a science fiction story. And there are science fiction elements, but it's mostly used as like paint for an otherwise very pulpy crime book. Um, it's very generic, deeply generic. The character actions here make no sense. The plot is nonsensical. Our main protagonist is just like a dude who is like, oh, he's a rigid man and whatever. I don't know. There's just nothing. There was nothing here that was good, honestly. Besides the pacing, uh, and the few entertaining bits I got out of it, I would not recommend this book. Genuinely, I gave it a 5 out of 10 because there were a few moments I enjoyed. There were a few pulpy things that I could get into. It wasn't like the worst thing I've ever read, but it is not good either. It's not really worth your time unless you absolutely adore this author or you adore these kinds of books and you want one sent on Mars. Otherwise, not really worth your time. There's barely any science fiction there at all. The story is kind of a mess. The villains are kind of a mess. The protagonist is probably the best part of the story, and he is just average, just boring, just like nothing special about this book whatsoever, besides the fact that it is short. It's a quick read. It's one of those ones where you can finish in a day. I think it's only like 5 hours on audio, so it's like, I don't know, like maybe 150 pages, something like that. It's very short. It's just not very good. It's definitely not one that I'd say is worth your time. After that, I read the Dasadi Experiment by Frank Herbert. This is one of his non-Dune science fiction books. And this was an improvement, although not as drastic of an improvement over the previous book as I was hoping for. People by now should probably know I'm a big Frank Herbert fan, especially with Dune. Dune is one of my favorite science fiction sagas of all time. The first book is what I consider to be an absolute masterpiece. It's one of my favorite books I've ever read in my entire life. I think it's one of the best books I ever read in my entire life. And I love the way Frank Herbert writes. I love the way he deals with science fiction. He deals with themes and characters and politics in a very intriguing way that speaks to me, I guess. So going in this, I had high hopes because the concept is really, really cool. About, there's these people, they're trapped on a planet, they're being experimented on. It's very like, just like, it's very like, it's almost like the Tuskegee experiments on like a world. And it's very advanced science fiction. And he deals with a lot of really interesting themes that, he's touched on in his, obviously in the Dune Saga and his other works about, society, social engineering, politics, harsh environments, humanism, all sorts of stuff like that. But unfortunately for me, I really like the themes. I really like the philosophy that Frank Herbert experiments with here. I really like the idea of what he's writing, but I don't think that beyond those ideas that this is like a really it's just a great book. You know what I mean? It's solid. It's a really solid book, but I don't think it's great. What makes Dune great is that it deals with its themes and everything that it tries to accomplish while also having a really fun story to tell. And this Dasadi Experiment is not like a fun story. Just not. Like it's dark. It's a bit dull, to be honest, for how dark of a story this should be. Like it's not necessarily as dark as you would think it would be. It's not paced super well. Not that Dune is very well paced, to be honest. The characters are really forgettable, and the main conflict is less interesting than you would think it would be. There's some interesting stuff. There's some good set pieces. There's some incredible world building, great themes, great philosophical kind of thought processes going on here. I like what Frank Herbert does on a an intellectual level, but the actual reading experience was a little it was just So I gave it a 7 out of 10. I think this is definitely for people who really like Frank Herbert or they really like science fiction that explores uh, a more thematic approach to writing. But that's not me. I like characters. I like action. I am who I am. But this will definitely work for other people better than it did for me. And I wish I liked it more, but it's still good at the end of the day. It's just not excellent. And finally, the last book I read before the month ended, and what is going to be my book of the month, very strongly, better than every other book I read this month, including The Count of Monte Cristo, is No Country for Old Men by Cormac McCarthy. I just uploaded a review maybe 2 hours ago on this, so if you want me to talk about it for about like 11 minutes, go check that out. But this was just awesome. This was just awesome. I mean, this was an incredible novel. The themes explored here, the way it was written, the way Cormac McCarthy deals with characters, and how he paced this book, and how lean it was, and how there was just no room to breathe, just left me stupefied. It really did. It's probably one of the best books I've read in recent memory. It's probably the best book I've read this year, although my favorite is probably still The Stand, I'll be honest. But this is right up there with The Stand for favorite book of the year. I mean, it's going to be those two heavyweights. They're going to have to duke it out in my brain for a while. But this was just awesome. This was a really quick read for me. I think I finished it in 2 days. I could have finished it in one had I really gone for it. It's only like 8 hours on Audible. The performance was incredible. Just a really, really good book. From the second it opened to the second it ended, man, it had me by the throat and it did not let go. This was a total rush. I mean, I really wanted to finish this month really strongly, and I was honestly just like looking through Audible to see what I could finish before the month ended. And I wanted something fast. I wanted something vicious. I wanted something that would just blow my socks off. I had this on my TBR for a long time. And I said, I'm just gonna quick read it. I'm just gonna quick listen to it before the month ends, because it's only 8 hours, and it's free on Audible. So if you have Audible, shout out to them. It's free, so I definitely recommend it. But yeah, this was a banger, dude. I mean, this was better than I had anticipated. And I would gladly pay full money to have listened to this book, or paid full money to own this book. I mean, this was just one for the books, in my opinion. I gave it a 9.5 out of 10. And honestly, the more I think about it, the better I like it. It's one that is aging very well in my brain, and it's only been like 3 days since I finished it. So yeah, 9.5 out of 10. No Country for Old Men is going to be my book of the month very easily. So March was a very, very strong month for me. I managed to finish 7 books this month. Some of them were on the shorter side. I did finish 2 absolute chunkers though, and I felt like I ended on a really high note with No Country for Old Men. So going into April, obviously I'm coming off a high. That was No Country for Old Men. I also managed to read 2 absolute other bangers, 3 actually. Wastelands, The Count of Monte Cristo, Witchwood Crown. It was a very strong month for me. It was very, very strong. It increased my average by quite a bit. So going into this month, I was trying to figure out what I was going to follow up with, and somehow I accidentally convinced myself to read 3 books at the exact same time. So this is what's happening for April, right? I'm currently 40% into Christine by Stephen King, the one about the Plymouth Fury that is haunted. So far, I'm really liking this. This is probably one of the most relatable books that King has produced that I've read. I'll have to talk about it in my review. Obviously, I don't want to spoil too much here, but it just really reminds me of my time in high school. It reminds me of, I wasn't necessarily obsessed with cars the same way that the central character here is obsessed with cars. But I remember being a teenage boy and wanting a car and I was really obsessed with this one motorcycle. It just really reminds me of my time in high school. I'll just say that. So I'll talk about that obviously when I'm finished with it. But so far, it's very good. It's very, very good. I'm really, really enjoying myself. Besides that, I'm also 50% into Welcome to Farpoint Rookie by Theo. This was sent to me by a author. They sent me it free of charge. All they asked was I would review it for them or rate it for them. And I tell you what, so far I'm really enjoying it. It really reminds me of like Men in Black or Inside Job, if you've ever seen that comedy on Netflix. It's very funny. It's got some great ideas. It's got some great world building. I'm really enjoying the dynamic between the main character and his rookie that he's training. It's very Men in Black, and I'm a huge fan of Men in Black. Huge fan of Will Smith in that movie, and it's really anything that makes me remember Men in Black is already going to be one that I am inclined to enjoy. I'll say that. So I think if it stays as strong as it has been so far, it's going to be a very good book. And finally, the last book I'm currently in the middle of is I'm about 60% into Starship Troopers by Robert Heinlein. So far, again, I'm only 60%. I'm not loving this as much as I want to. And this is bound to happen, right? This is a science fiction classic. It's one that's very controversial, or was very controversial. And again, I'll talk about more in my review, but it kind of almost, I don't know if the author was promoting it, but it deals with a fascist society and a very militaristic society. And I'm not someone like, I don't need to read a book that endorses my personal political or moral beliefs in order to enjoy it. My problem is got nothing to do with the fact that Heinlein may or may not have believed in this kind of society to be ideal, all right? I actually think the discussion around the moral and philosophical and political stuff in this book is really well done, but it's dry. This is a dry book. The main character is like just this total military dude, and I really expected this to be kind of more of a not necessarily fun, but I expected this to be a more action-packed, military action book. I expected a little bit more controversy from this book, and it's just not giving it to me. I'm a huge fan of the movie, so maybe I'm just already inherently biased to be against this book, but about 60% in, and it's giving me strong 3-star energy right now. I'll just say that. It could bump up into 4, low 4, but right now, I'm not totally in love with this book the way I want it to be, which is fine. You know, not every science fiction book classic is going to hit for me. Obviously, I have a certain preference, it seems, for space operas and ones that are more action-oriented, you know, and that's who I am as a person. But it's not a bad book. It's just not great either. But we'll see. We'll see what I have to say in the review. After that, I'll have already read 3 books, and I should finish all those by the end of the week. The one that might take me the longest is Christine, and I'm already, like 8 hours into it or something crazy like that. So I expect to read or finish all these this week or early next week at the latest. After that, I've got 3 more books I've got lined up. If I read more than that, obviously you guys will be the first ones to know. But after I finish Christine, Welcome to Farpoint Rookie, and Starship Troopers, I'm going to jump into Empire of Grass by Ted Williams. It's just time to go back to Austin Ard, baby. It's time. I've been switching between Austin Ard and The Dark Tower, and I've been really enjoying my experience. With everything that the Witchwood Crown set up, I'm very excited for Empire of Grass. I think that this is going to be a book that I'm going to really enjoy. I'm very interested to see what Ted Williams does with this book. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of stuff that I think could happen, but I don't know. I like going in these books as blind as possible. I don't even like creating theories of what I think is going to happen. I just like to read and enjoy it and immerse myself. But I think Empire of Grass, I have a strong suspicion that this is going to be my book of the month. I can't guarantee it because there are two other contenders that are very strong, but I think Empire of Grass might be my book of the month. I'm going to lock it in. That's my prediction. After that, I'm going to read the fourth book in the Dark Tower, Wizarding Glass. I've heard so much about this book. I've heard how great it is. I know it's technically a prequel and a sequel. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to knowing more about Roland and his world. I have adored this series so far. It's becoming very quickly one of my favorites. I think it might overall by the end be my favorite King work. And yeah, this has just been incredible so far. So Wizarding Glass, I expect this to be a 5-star rate. I'm just gonna be honest with you. I totally expect this to be a contender for Book of the Month. And yeah, Empire of Grass and Wizard of Glass, I think, are gonna duke it out for the number one spot. Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe I'll read something else this month because I always throw in one more because I'm crazy. But yeah, I think that those two are definitely the biggest contenders. And finally, and I think I'm actually going to read this between Empire of Grass and Wizarding Glass, is Pet Sematary by Stephen King. Yeah, I've heard a lot about this book. I've heard about that this is Stephen King's scariest book. People have warned me going into this to just be cautious because I have a kid of my own now. And this is obviously, it deals with child death, if I remember correctly. I've seen the movie, so I should remember that, but it deals with child death. It deals with death a lot. And yeah, I'm doing this for the book club I run. We read all the Stephen King novels, or trying to. And yeah, Pet Sematary is one I've been looking forward to. I actually own it. And I think that I feel like it's gonna make me cry. I don't know. I can't guarantee that. But I know that King is a very good author, and I would not be surprised by the end if this is also Book of the Month. I mean, I don't know. I've really enjoyed Stephen King's horror, but I seem to enjoy his fantasy or non-horror books more. But I feel like Pet Sematary might kind of crack the code for me. The highest I've scored one of his horror books was It, and I gave him a 9 out of 10. But who knows? Pet Sematary could hit harder. I'm really looking forward to kind of seeing what my reaction is, because as I've seen the movie, but it wasn't very good, and I know that King can bring it, so I'm looking forward to what he's got to do. But yeah, April's stacked. I'm very excited to read all these books. There might be like one or two I throw in there as bonus tracks for myself. But we'll see. I mean, I'm in the middle of 3 books right now, and if I read another 3, that's 6 right there. Pet Sematary is not too long. I think it's only it's under 20 hours. Wizarding Glass is closer to 30, and Empire Grass is over 30. So I'm stacked. I'll say that. I definitely have some chunkers to get through this month. But I'm looking forward to it, and I hope it's a good follow-up to March, because March was just stacked. I mean, No Country for Old Men, The Wastelands, The Witchwood Crown, and The Count of Monte Cristo. I don't know. It might be the best month of the year. It's definitely the best month of the year so far, but we'll see. We'll see what April brings. We'll see what May brings. We'll see what the rest of the year brings. But I got a lot coming down the pipeline I'm excited for, and I'm just ecstatic to have read so many good books. And again, No Country for Old Men. Read it. You should read it. You really should read it. That is my recommendation for this month. Read No Country for Old Men if you haven't. Cormac McCarthy is a genius.